The night she said it, the words didn't sound like jealousy. They sounded like a truth that had been waiting too long to breathe. I still remember the way the hallway light flickered as I laughed casually and said, "I just got back from a date," not knowing that one sentence was about to rewrite everything I thought I knew about love, loneliness, and the person living right next door. If you've ever missed the one person who was always there, even while you were looking somewhere else, stay with me, because this story doesn't begin with romance. It begins with blindness. I had just come home, keys clinking, heart slightly disappointed in that familiar way dates sometimes leave you. She was nice. Polite. Perfect on paper. But as I walked up the stairs of our apartment building, I felt that quiet emptiness I never admitted out loud. That's when I saw her, my neighbor, sitting on the steps with a grocery bag torn at the bottom, oranges rolling everywhere. We'd known each other for 3 years. Morning hellos. Borrowed sugar. Late-night conversations about work, stress, life. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. At least that's what I told myself. I helped her gather the oranges, and she smiled the same warm smile she always did. I mentioned the date casually, like it meant nothing, like I wasn't hoping she'd ask more. She paused, stood up slowly, brushed her hands on her jeans, looked straight into my eyes, and said quietly, "She won't love you like I do." No anger. No tears. Just certainty. Time froze. The hallway felt smaller. My heart started racing, not because I was flattered, but because something inside me recognized the truth before my mind could catch up. I laughed it off, awkwardly, said something stupid like, "You're funny," and escaped into my apartment. That night, I didn't sleep. Her words echoed louder than any rejection I'd ever faced. I started remembering things I had ignored for years, the way she checked on me when I was sick, the way she remembered my coffee order, the way she listened without trying to fix me. Meanwhile, I'd been chasing people who barely noticed me. The next few days were unbearable. Every sound from the hallway made my heart jump. When I finally saw her again, she was distant. Polite, but guarded. The warmth was gone. That's when fear hit me. Not fear of commitment, but fear of loss. I tried to tell myself it was too late, that I had imagined her feelings, that neighbors don't become soulmates. Then I got a text from the girl I'd been dating. "I don't think this is going anywhere." I stared at the screen and felt relief. And guilt. And clarity. I knocked on my neighbor's door that night, heart pounding harder than any first date ever had. She opened it slowly, eyes tired. I didn't rehearse anything. I just said, "I think I've been blind." She didn't interrupt. She let me speak. I told her how I'd been chasing the idea of love while ignoring the real thing standing right next to me. When I finished, she looked down and said, "I didn't say what I said to trap you. I said it because I was tired of lying to myself." That honesty broke me. I realized love isn't loud. It doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it waits patiently in the background, hoping you'll grow enough to see it. But the challenge wasn't over. Loving her meant risking everything, our friendship, our comfort, our safe routine. She told me she wouldn't be a backup plan. She wouldn't be a maybe. That night, she didn't give me an answer. She closed the door gently, leaving me alone with the hardest part of love, accountability. Weeks passed. We barely spoke. I learned what absence really feels like. I stopped dating. I stopped pretending. I started working on myself, not for her, but because I finally saw how emotionally lazy I'd been. One evening, I found a note slipped under my door. "If you're still serious, meet me on the roof at sunset." My hands were shaking as I climbed the stairs. She was already there, city lights flickering below, wind in her hair. Before I could speak, she said, "This is the hook of our story. If we start this, it has to be real. No distractions. No running when it gets hard." I nodded, tears in my eyes, because for the first time, I wasn't afraid of hard. I was afraid of losing her. I told her I was done looking elsewhere for something that had been home all along. She took a long breath, then smiled, the real smile I'd missed every day. We didn't kiss right away. We just stood there, two people finally choosing each other after years of silence. Love didn't fix everything instantly. We argued. We stumbled. We had to unlearn old habits and build new trust. But every challenge felt meaningful, because it was honest. Today, when I think back to that night in the hallway, I understand something deeply. The most powerful love stories aren't about chasing. They're about noticing. About valuing the person who sees you when you're not trying to impress anyone. If there's someone in your life who loves you quietly, consistently, and without conditions, don't wait until they grow tired of waiting. Sometimes the greatest love of your life lives right next door, hoping you'll finally hear the truth when they whisper it. The hardest part of choosing her wasn't the fear of failure, it was the fear of finally being seen for who I really was, without excuses, without escape. If you think love gets easier once feelings are confessed, stay with me, because chapter 2 begins where comfort ends, and where real love is tested. After that evening on the rooftop, nothing magically turned perfect. In fact, things felt heavier. More real. She wasn't just my neighbor anymore. She was someone who knew my flaws, my emotional laziness, my habit of running when things got deep. And she didn't look at me with blind hope, she looked at me with expectations. The kind that force you to grow. At first, I mistook the quiet for distance. She didn't text all day. She didn't cling. She didn't ask for reassurance. That scared me more than rejection ever had. One night I finally asked her, "Why are you so calm?" She looked at me and said, "Because I'm not chasing you. I'm choosing you. And those are very different things." That sentence changed how I understood love. I realized how often I'd been addicted to attention, not connection. The challenge came when life tested us almost immediately. My job became unstable. Stress turned me irritable. Old habits whispered that it would be easier to pull away than explain my fears. One evening, instead of listening, I snapped at her over something small. She went quiet, not angry, not dramatic, just quiet. The next day, she didn't come out when I passed her door. That silence hit harder than any argument. I knocked. She opened the door slowly and said, "If you're going to shut me out every time life gets heavy, I can't be here. I love you, but I won't disappear inside your bad days." That was the moment I understood the cost of real love. It doesn't beg you to stay. It asks you to show up. I apologized, not the easy kind, but the kind where you admit patterns, not just mistakes. I told her I was scared of failing her. She replied, "I don't need perfection. I need honesty." From that day on, we learned a new language together, one made of patience, boundaries, and truth. We faced small battles that felt big, learning each other's triggers, respecting space, choosing conversation over silence. Slowly, the building that once felt like separate lives began to feel like a shared home. One night, months later, we sat on the same steps where she'd once dropped her groceries. I laughed and said, "You know, I told you about that date like it meant nothing." She smiled softly and said, "I know. But it meant everything." I realized then that love isn't about dramatic confessions, it's about timing, courage, and staying when it's easier to leave. Looking back, I see how close I was to losing the best thing in my life simply because it arrived quietly. So here's the truth I want you to carry with you: love doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it lives beside you, listens to you, waits for you to grow brave enough to notice it. And when someone loves you not just for who you are, but for who you can become, don't take that lightly. Choose them. Show up. Because the right person won't love you louder than everyone else. They'll love you deeper. By the time chapter 3 began, I understood something most people learn too late: love doesn't prove itself in happy moments, it proves itself when life pulls the ground out from under you. If you're still listening, don't leave now, because this part isn't about romance. It's about commitment, loss, and the quiet strength that turns love into a lifetime. Everything changed the night she got the call. Her mother had collapsed, miles away, and there was panic in her voice I'd never heard before. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and said, "I'm coming with you." On the drive, she stared out the window, holding herself together in pieces. In that moment, I realized how different I was from the man I used to be, the one who avoided emotional weight. Now, all I wanted was to carry some of hers. At the hospital, time stretched painfully. Doctors spoke in careful sentences. She finally broke down, and when she did, she didn't apologize for crying. She just leaned into me, trusting I wouldn't step away. That trust felt heavier than any promise. Days turned into weeks. We stayed in a small, unfamiliar town, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, eating vending machine food, learning how fragile everything really is. There were no romantic gestures, no poetic words, just presence. I watched her grow exhausted and strong at the same time, and somewhere in that struggle, my love for her settled into something unshakable. When her mother slowly recovered, relief didn't come as celebration, it came as gratitude. One evening, sitting outside the hospital, she said quietly, "You